The book They Say, I Say by Gerald Graff and Kathy Barkenstein presents academic writing as conversation, where you're introducing what other people have to say on a topic, then sharing your own thoughts. In order to share what we know from other writers, we tend to summarize, paraphrase, or quote. While these skills may seem pretty fundamental, that's precisely the reason they sometimes go ignored. People don't pay attention to them because they feel more basic, and their writing can suffer because of it. So, this lecture will go over how to effectively quote and summarize writing in order to make your research paper the best it can be. First, it's important to understand the basic distinctions between quoting, summarizing, and paraphrasing. These definitions are from Purdue OWL. Quoting is the most direct way that we can show what someone else is saying. They are identical to the source using a narrow segment of the source. Rhetorically, we might choose to quote when we want to make sure the reader understands the original context. People tend to adopt the attitude of the author said it better than I can when it comes to quoting, and while sometimes this is true, it's not always the most effective. When you have a sea of quotes, your own argument can get lost. You read the source so you can tell the audience what's most important from it, which is where we get into summarizing. Summarizing and paraphrasing often get confused or conflated with one another, but they're different things and they serve different purposes in writing. Summarizing means that you're putting the main points into your own words. It's broad and it covers the whole text. They're also shorter than the original material. Think about 1 or 2 sentences per paragraph of text. Paraphrasing, while also shorter than the original material, covers less than a summary does. Paraphrasing is looking at one part of a larger text and only that part. So I could paraphrase the scene in Emperor's New Groove where Kronk pulls the wrong lever and sends Yzma down the chute, but I'd summarize by telling you what the movie is about more broadly. I'd quote it when I said, the poison for Cusco, the poison chosen specifically to kill Cusco's poison. Now the question is, which of these do you cite? The answer is all of them. You should always let your audience know where the information is coming from, whether it's through a formal in-text citation or some other reference that you include in the sentence, like on page 7 of this book, this author says that, blah, blah, blah. Again, this is ethical behavior in writing, and we want to make sure that we're behaving ethically. That gives you more credibility as a writer. There's an article called Annoying Ways That People Use Sources by Kyle Steadman, which I'll link to in the description, but he covers a number of ways that people incorporate sources into their writing that can take the audience by surprise. He doesn't frame them as rules, but instead as annoyances, because he's looking for making writing the most rhetorically effective it can be. The first annoyance he refers to is what he calls armadillo roadkill, or where the audience hits a quote that comes out of nowhere. This is distracting, and it makes the reader question how the quote relates to the rest of what you're writing. Next, we get to what Steadman calls dating Spider-Man, which is where the writing is going perfectly well, it's making sense, you're enjoying yourself, and then Spider-Man leaps away and moves on from the conversation. For quoting, this can look like leaving a quote at the end of a paragraph and then moving into the next paragraph and next idea. Then there's Uncle Barry and his encyclopedia of useless knowledge. Here, the author goes from piece to piece to piece of information, with all of the pieces very poorly connected. Steadman argues that this is what it feels like when an author includes a bunch of quotes without connecting or explaining them. There are more quotes than the author's actual writing. Am I in the Right Movie comes next, and this is a smaller annoyance for Steadman, but one he often finds himself falling into. This is just where the verb tense of your sentence doesn't match the same sentence of the quote, or where the verb doesn't match the quantity of the sentence. There are a couple more in his article, but they're not as applicable to research papers, so we won't cover them here. The easiest way to fix nearly all of these problems is to focus on the template of a quote sandwich. It's a rather bland sandwich with only 3 parts, 2 of which are bread, but it's a sandwich nevertheless. So we'll start with our first piece of bread, which is an introduction of the quote. This can be short and sweet, something as simple as, this author says that, blah, 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 right? But we need something to prepare the audience that they're about to read a quote. The meat of the sandwich, or whatever filling you would like, is the quote itself. So you should make sure you're copying and pasting it or writing it exactly as you found it in the original source. The rule of thumb is that the quote should be no longer than 40 words or 4 full lines. So you'll want to make sure you're only quoting when it's absolutely necessary. The last piece of bread is an explanation. Here, you're describing to your audience how the quote relates to the argument. What's its purpose? What does it add or show about your research? Summaries can serve lots of purposes, and Gerald Graff and Kathy Birkenstein list out lots of reasons that someone might choose to summarize. They also give us some handy tips on how to summarize effectively. They suggest that you have at least 50% of the writing as your own as opposed to summary. They also suggest that you suspend your own beliefs when reading the source you plan to summarize. That way you can avoid sounding biased in your summary, and it gives you more credibility from your audience's perspective. They say that a good summary has a focus or spin that allows the summary to fit with your own agenda while still being true to the text you are summarizing. In your research paper, a summary can be useful to express ideas to your readers about the research that you've done. You'll want to make sure, though, that you're balancing your writing with other people's writing. Writing effective summaries helps to bring your audience into whatever it is you're writing or discussing, and this happens in lots of situations other than just research papers. Being aware of ways to avoid plagiarism and academic dishonesty through quoting and summarizing also makes us more ethical, engaged, and effective students, writers, and researchers. Remember that for this project, you're required to include 3 quotes, and you need to incorporate 6 sources, so you'll be doing plenty of quoting and summarizing in your paper. If you have any questions as you work, I encourage you to reach out to the Writing Center for an appointment, post on the catch-all discussion board, or send me an email.